Emergency crews who rushed to a famous San Francisco hotel just hours into 2026 found Victoria Jones, daughter of award-winning actor Tommy Lee Jones, dead. Now police are trying to figure out what exactly happened to turn the start of a new year into a tragedy as chilling new details are revealed. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Now, before we go any further into this, there is something that we use here at Law&Crime that can be very, very useful to you. It's called Truth Finder. It is the powerful public records search service that we use to do research here on Law&Crime. But you want to talk about a useful resource? You plug in a name, you get address information, you get criminal history. And let me just say, this can give you some peace of mind. Truth Finder is one of the largest public records search services in the United States. And with a paid subscription, you can get access to unlimited reports about almost anyone. And that includes looking up registered sex offenders in your area too. So stay informed, stay safe, check public records with Truth Finder now at truthfinder.com/LC-Sidebar. Victoria Kafka Jones, the 34-year-old daughter of actor Tommy Lee Jones, has been found dead in a Ritzy, California hotel. But how she ended up that way, that is still shrouded in mystery. That's the question. Now, the Fairmont Hotel is known for playing host to many high-profile celebrities. It's a major, major property. But this time, instead of a crowd of admirers, the hotel was swarmed by San Francisco police and firefighters and technicians from the medical examiner's office. According to TMZ, a call came in about a medical emergency just before 3 a.m. on Thursday, so this is New Year's Day. And around 20 minutes later, police officers met with paramedics who told them there was an adult female who was found dead. The Daily Mail spoke with a source who said it was a hotel guest who found Victoria on the ground on the 14th floor on the Fairmont. Now, the Mail reports that this guest thought maybe that Victoria had passed out from drinking, so they alerted hotel staff, but everyone quickly realized this was a far more serious situation and that she was unresponsive. According to dispatch audio that was obtained by TMZ, the call originally came across the radio as a possible overdose. Take a listen.
Alyssa Cross of Jones and Leavenworth, respond code 3 for the overdose with color change, responding control A1.
According to TMZ, Victoria was pronounced dead at the scene. So far, officials haven't released a cause or manner of death. That's probably awaiting the medical examiner's findings. But authorities do say there wasn't obvious evidence of foul play, like trauma to the body. It doesn't appear, they say as well, that Victoria took her own life. Now, it's also unclear right now whether she was a registered guest of the hotel or she was just visiting. Hopefully, those answers will come in due time. But I will tell you a little bit more about her. So despite her celebrity connection to her father, Victoria, it seems, spent much of her life outside of the spotlight. Now, she did appear alongside her dad at multiple premieres over the years, but what we know is that Victoria was born on September 3rd, 1991, to Jones and his former wife, Kimberly Coughley. She has a brother, Austin, who is 10 years older than her. Now, Victoria seemed destined to maybe follow in her father's footsteps in Hollywood, at least at the beginning. She made her film debut with a minor part in Men in Black 2 when she was just 10 or 11 years old. In fact, in a 2006 interview with The New Yorker, Tommy Lee Jones praised his daughter's work. And this was on the Western The Three Burials of Melquiades Estrada, which he apparently directed. He told the magazine, "She's a good actress, has her SAG card, speaks impeccable Spanish. When she was a baby, I told Letitia, her nurse, to speak to her in Spanish." Now, I will say this, he did tell a story about the then 14-year-old's apparent problems with early time calls. Quote, "I fired my daughter. She had to get up at 5 a.m. for her part. One morning, she wouldn't get out of bed. I said, 'Honey, this is work,' but she wouldn't budge. So I fired her. Then, without telling me, the production staff went over and woke her and rushed her out to the set just in time." So Victoria had a few more small acting parts over the years, but then she seems to have moved on from acting. The San Francisco Chronicle reported on California court records that show a woman named Victoria Jones was arrested multiple times this year in at least 2 counties on misdemeanor charges. Now, we were able to confirm through Santa Cruz County court records that a Victoria Jones was arrested there last summer for public intoxication and resisting an officer, but so far we haven't been able to confirm if it is the same person. Meantime, Napa County court records show that Victoria Kafka Jones was arrested twice there last year. In April of 2025, she faced 3 misdemeanor charges: obstructing a peace officer, possession of a narcotic, and allegedly being under the influence of a narcotic. Then in June, she was charged in the same county with misdemeanor domestic battery. She had entered not guilty pleas In both of those cases, she was out on bail. But look, at this point, as we're trying to piece together answers, police in San Francisco are asking anybody with information to reach out to them. The number is on the screen. We're going to put it up in the episode description as well. You can call 415-575-4444 or send a text to tip 411 with SFPD at the beginning of the message. And before we go any further into this, I just have to say our hearts go out to Tommy Lee Jones and his family for this loss. I mean, whatever the circumstances are, this is just a painful, tragic way to start the new year. I'm so sorry for them. We hope that they have some answers as to what happened inside that hotel room, and we will continue to bring you updates. But I want to talk a little bit more about it right here. So now I want to bring in retired homicide detective Fil Waters to talk more about this. Phil, thank you so much for taking the time. Happy New Year to you. This is a really sad start to the new year. First, I want to just understand, would a homicide detective come to a scene like this? I mean, what's the initial investigation look like?
Well, Happy New Year to you, Jesse. It's good to be back with you. I tell you, I would think in a particular event like this, where you have at least on the onset, I would categorize it as a suspicious death. There's no way to explain. Apparently there are no signs of trauma on the body that we can see. I think at HPD anyway, we would send a pair out there, probably send a crime scene unit first to take a look at the scene itself and then make a call back to homicide and send a pair out there, just because there's a lot of questions. It's just kind of a strange event that this young lady turns up dead in the middle of a hallway in the middle of the night. So I think in those circumstances, there would be a pair sent out.
Yeah, a hallway room. It's interesting. By the way, when you're dealing with a hotel, right? How does that scene different from a house? How's that scene different from any other area where you were encountering a dead body? Is that investigation different if you're dealing with a massive property like this?
Well, that's a great question, because I worked security for 22 years in a major hotel in Houston, and we did have a couple of events that occurred in the hotel that required police action. A couple of them required homicide responding, and it is different in the sense that you have a different setting. It's not like you have a contained, like a house. You got the house and that's it. You've got, at least in my case, you've got 1,000 houses. Is kind of what you look at it in each room. So each room is, for lack of a better term, is a residence, right? So it depends on where it happens. Now, if it happens in a room, then that hallway is going to be secured and that floor is going to be secured. And then it's a matter of, you're going to have to, as you get into it, you're going to have to start canvassing that floor. If you're going to have to, you've got to get management to cooperate with you, of course, to secure the scenes and not upset the general functioning of the hotel. From that aspect, it does get a little bit more complicated. There's some more moving parts. And then you go about the investigation in the same way that you would wherever the scene might manifest itself. So, but that securing part of it is probably the most critical.
But you would imagine there's cameras everywhere. So if we're trying to do a timeline of events or what her movements were or when she entered the room, that's going to be easy to document, right?
Well, I would think it would be, especially when it's contained within the hotel, but then you don't know if she left the hotel and then came back and that kind of a thing. So you would, and there's ways to do that. I know that the hotel I worked in, that way back when the videos really started coming around, they put all the video cameras up. I'm assuming that the hotel that I worked in has updated all those systems, and I'm just assuming that this hotel in San Francisco has some sort of CCTV coverage. So you got to, and then you can go to the times in and out of the room. and get an idea of when perhaps, and then you couple that with the video footage that you might have, and you get an idea of being able to establish the timeline, then talk to witnesses, talk to friends, uh, look in cell phones. I mean, there's a whole lot of ways to, especially in the digital world that we live in, to put together a timeline. And that's really going to be important here, because the only odd thing about this particular case is that this young woman is by herself now. And somebody, and I think I read that, or another guest, it doesn't say that they're associated with her, found her. And so that's the first question in my mind, is who found her? Do they have any, relationship with her? And then you try to backtrack, is how does she end up by herself in the floor? So, but again, you got to work from the moment where she is and then work backwards from there and try to determine where she started from.
You mentioned this before. When they say there's no evidence of foul play, I have two questions about that. One, is it only there's no signs of external trauma, right? I imagine that's why. And B, can that change? Can they say maybe there's no preliminary evidence of foul play, but that could change over the course of an investigation?
Well, there's no signs of foul play. That's a media concoction, right? I would never use that term. When I did sound bites, I would not use that term. I would go more along the lines of what you just stated, with that at this point in time, we don't have any signs of trauma on the body, but the investigation is ongoing.
Mm-hmm. So why say it like that, and can that change? And to be clear, we don't, it could very well be that, right? It could very well be that this is a death that is not under other kind of suspicious circumstances, that someone else was involved. There could be multiple reasons, but can that change? What would lead to a change like that? How should we be thinking about it?
That's going to be as a result of the investigation, right? So you don't want to get ahead of yourself. This is one of these things where you before you get out there and say, and let's just say for the sake of our discussion, if you want to get out there, if they do determine that there is some suspicious circumstances behind it, and they're delving off into those things, you want to be very careful about coming out in a soundbite to inform the public that we now have some evidence that's leading us in another direction, but the investigation is continuing. It's a kind of a fine line, because when you get out there and you make these sound bites, of course, what the hotel is concerned about is the security of their guests. So if this was something that occurred that was suspicious in nature, or if it was something that was caused by another person killing her, then the guests in the hotel are the ones you've got to assure that there's some sense of urgency here in making sure that you're secure. Law enforcement is doing everything they can do to bring about some answers to this thing. And so it becomes a PR problem, and reassuring people that we don't have a killer running loose here in the hotel. And if we do, is it unique to her, or is it just some random person, ran through the hotel, grabbed her, murdered her in some way, and then escaped? So again, you got to be careful about that. And you need to, and if you're going to come out and make a statement of some kind, you better have some basis for making whichever way you're going to go. Because if you come out and you make some sort of vague statement, all that does is creates people online, and they start coming with the conspiracies and blah, blah, blah. And it just creates a lot of confusion that is not necessary.
I 100% understand that. You make a great point about it. When would the cause and manner of death be determined, and when would that information be released?
Well, the ME is going to get it when they do the autopsy. They may be able to determine a preliminary cause of death. Maybe this one, because at least at the scene, what we're being told is, her clothing is on and so forth. So there's no visible signs at the scene of trauma. But once they get her to the medical examiner, and they start to examine the body, they may see some signs of trauma. There may be something there that they didn't see at the scene. And I know I had a scene where we had a death. We brought the guy to he got to the medical examiner's office. They did the autopsy and found that there was and it was with a screwdriver, a puncture wound in his chest that did not, there was no blood. There was no
Wow.
bleeding. And, but when it got him on the table and got him exposed, well, you see this, I mean, a very small puncture wound. And that's how he died. He was stabbed by his girlfriend with a screwdriver. So there's a lot of things that are going to be told. That body is evidence. And once the autopsy is conducted, now they may be able to tell, once they get into the autopsy, that there may have been some heart issues. There may be some other things in the organs of the body that tells them that this is what they believe occurred. And it's a preliminary thing, remember. But I think in this particular case, in cases like this, what's going to be critical is the tox tests. And those tox tests, you know, they take sometimes months to get back, certainly weeks. And then the DME has a better idea of coming up with an actual ruling as to the cause of death. And also, and once we get the cause of death, of course, that's going to determine what the manner of death is. So those types of manners of death that they can rule it homicide, they can rule it natural, they can rule it accidental, they can rule it undetermined. So we'll have to wait and see. And I know that's where people get so impatient, especially when you have a relatively high profile death like this that is unexplained at the scene. And again, that caused people to conjure up all sorts of ridiculous conspiracy theories and stories.
But bottom line, let investigators do their work. I do wonder if the family is different. What do I mean by that? Before we wrap things up, how would you communicate what the findings are to the family before anyone else, before the media? What is the conversation with the family? Do you keep them in the loop during the course of the investigation? How much do you communicate with them what the results are? Talk to us about that.
Well, I've done that many times, and that is one of the most difficult jobs of a homicide detective, is to shepherd the family through a death, at least initially, that is unexplainable. I mean, I think she's 34 years old. I mean, she's a young woman in the best part of her life, and all of a sudden, boom, this happens. I always took the approach that being straightforward and as open and honest as I could be was the best way to communicate with the families. Because, I've said this to families, I've said, look, I do not want to tell you something that you might want to hear. Because when you find out that that's what I'm doing, you're going to be mad at me. And I do not want you mad at me. So I want to be full disclosure. I want to be open. And I want to tell you what I am finding in the course of the investigation so that we can better maneuver through this, because it's tough, no matter who the person is and who the loss affects. So it is tough to do. I tried to be very empathetic and understand what they're going through, because I've been through those types of things myself. So it just gives me a little bit of insight to, and I always tell them, I'm sorry, very sorry for their loss. And I always try to reassure them that I'm keeping them in my prayers, and I meant that. And that gives some consolation, some comfort, at least of the families that I've talked to over the course of my career.
And Phil, I'll tell you, they were lucky to have you. They were lucky to have you. Fil Waters, thank you for taking the time. We'll keep a careful eye on this and see where it progresses. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on, Jesse.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.